Hello, my name is Alex, and I am the host of How Bizarre Podcast, and this is episode 8 of the series. Hopefully you'll like it, and the show will make some traction in the time ahead. So, what is this podcast about? It's about storytelling, and especially about stories that are obscure, unknown to the wider public, strange and sometimes inexplicable, content that somehow never got the attention it deserved. Stories that are forgotten in the mists of time, regardless if they happened yesterday or some centuries ago. So if you are attracted to bizarre, shocking, or just plainly weird stuff, I think you'll find this podcast very informative and perhaps even entertaining. This podcast is for mature audiences, and listener discretion is advised. All that being said, now let us dive into the 8th episode of How Bizarre Podcast. This episode is named Grunts on Drugs. The use of narcotics during the most massive slaughterhouses in the 20th century, a century in which drugs were first outlawed, remains as a classic tragedy of statism, where on one hand, we have draconian legislation intended for a possible meth dealer, or any drug. If a dealer is not authorized by the state, he'll be thrown in a rape pit amongst killers, sodomites, and rapists. On the other hand, if authorized by the state, drugs are wonderful, humane, and irreplaceable. If your doctor is your dealer, it's fine. And of course, it's patriotic above all. A tragedy in which the main actors are methamphetamine, wild hypocrisy, and drug-killing machines, sometimes referred to as war heroes. Methamphetamine, first synthesized in 1893, attracted the attention of the Imperial Japanese Army already in the 20s, and later their allies of convenience, the German Wehrmacht, and it would be the Third Reich that would run riot with crystal meth. In both cases there was a massive distribution of meth tablets to soldiers, especially tankers and pilots in combat. The most bizarre form was the German chocolate filled with speed known as pervitin, which was distributed to the army. Oh yes, speed so sweet. Billions of doses were issued, first to the Wehrmacht and the Japanese army, and later, after seizing a certain amount in 1941, the Soviet Red Army began mass production and use of the so-called Vint, a cheap crystal meth, especially for the heroes of the Great Patriotic War. A second bizarre fact: during the search of corpses of German soldiers, captives, or seized supplies by Soviet soldiers, the priority was pervitin. Finland, the United States, and Great Britain are the other countries known to have used the drug to boost their patriotic charge and suicidal courage. It is difficult to say how many Japanese banzai suicide charges happen because of meth and alcohol, not because of patriotism. It is not difficult to guess what role this drug played in the initial success of Blitzkrieg. If the SS member could march twice as fast as a French or Polish mobilized peasant, being troops trained to work hard and well-conditioned, and if the German soldier could pass with twice as less sleep, the conclusion is not very complicated. How many casualties fell as the recruit, naturally inclined to take cover in combat, felt supercharged by speed and suddenly felt like a superhero on a mission to make the enemy's mothers cry? How many civilians were killed during trigger-happy trips on random orders of some corporal high on meth is anybody's guess. How many recruits would have returned home alive, or at least return home without missing an eye, leg, arm, liver, or spleen, is just a sad rhetorical question. Speed is not the only drug that has been used or developed for combat use, only the most common. The super drug named D9, which was tested on human guinea pigs in concentration camps and was supposed to make super soldiers, with an extremely high threshold of pain, endurance, and fitness, is just one of the drug secrets of World War II. The consequences of the continued use of the meth by the soldiers are not known either, because the drugging of their soldiers was an official secret that took decades to surface from the deepest corners of the septic tank of statism. Drugs continued their march further, to Korea and Vietnam, the latter war being instrumental for the heroin epidemic in the USA in the 70s. Then we have Yugoslav wars of 1991 to 2001, many African wars, Iraq versus Iran, or simply put in almost all post-World War II clashes. Synthetics have joined alcohol in the realm of militaristic drugs, conducive to inducing false courage and fierce patriotism that once smelled only on cheap gin or moonshine. New time always brings new aromas. It is important to have love for the country that loves us and protects us from drugs. Which one, you ask? Any country, anywhere. And that's not all. Meth was instrumental in the so-called German post-war economic miracle. Everyone, from a housewife doing chores to the factory worker working long hours on the graveyard shift, from bureaucrats to farmers, they all liked Pervitin. A whole nation on meth. Japanese too, though to a lesser degree. This is not in any way, shape or form hypothesis that the economic miracles of half destroyed Germany and Japan owe their success to meth, but it cannot be denied that it played significant role. Something that Germans nowadays are trying to sweep under the rag. Talking of miracles, there was the famous miracle of Bern in 1954, coming soon on How Bizarre podcast. I hope you all liked episode 8 of this podcast. Thank you so kindly for listening, and I will be back next time for episode 9 of the How Bizarre podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, sharing, and above all, subscribe to this channel, dear listener. Because, why not? Join me next time for another bizarre adventure through space and time. Cheerio.